right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for another Business Tech Talk session. My name is Andrea Lebeter, and I'm the Marketing Director at IT Solutions. Today's webinar is titled Strategic IT Planning for 2017 and will be presented by John Coetzee, VCIO here at IT Solutions. For those of you joining us for the first time, Business Tech Talks is a webinar series sponsored by a group of nationally recognized managed service providers. All of our members provide comprehensive network management and support solutions in different regions across the U.S. At any time during the webinar, feel free to submit your questions. We'll save some time at the end to circle back and answer these for you. And without further ado, here's John.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you everyone for joining our webcast.
My name is John Coetzee. I serve as a virtual CIO for IT Solutions. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to attend this seminar. We're going to try to keep this presentation short and focused for you. I've been with IT Solutions since 2002 and active in the IT industry since 1990. As Andrea mentioned, the topic for today's webinar is IT Strategic Planning for 2017. As a VCIO, I spend a lot of time with clients looking outward, first learning about their business, then working with them discussing workflow, operations, various technology tools, industry, and IT solutions best practices. At the end of the day, the most important thing is to ensure your organization is looking forward to where you want to be and focusing on how to get there. Along those lines, a key objective for businesses and organizations is to align IT with the business goals to achieve your desired strategic business outcomes. So how do we do that? We do that by building an actionable technology roadmap with a mindful eye to keeping technology costs down and reducing the business organization's overall exposure to risk. We talk about IT road mapping, but what is it? Why do it, and why should you care? An IT roadmap is a plan that aligns IT with business objectives to help you achieve your defined strategic outcomes. It is a visual representation that organizes and presents important information related to future plans. Many businesses know that they should consider 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month plans. However, even more important is strategic focus. You should be considering the next 18, 36, and 60 months. This is important because at the end of the day, the strategic plan is about leveraging technology efficiently and effectively to help you achieve the defined long-term business goals. So how do you begin? Firstly, it all starts by ensuring you understand your organization. Then you need to determine where you want your organization to be in the next 18, 36, and 60 months. Finally, you need to look at your technology. Do you presently have the tools and systems to adequately deliver your products and services today? Is technology in alignment for future requirements? How are you going to align technology with those future requirements? To expand on this, even though it sounds quite obvious, you need to ensure that you clearly understand the key services and products that you deliver. Knowing this, you are in a position to determine if you are currently employing the best tools to deliver those services and products today. Whether you're a business owner, CIO, network admin, work in operations, or sales, everyone needs technology to support their roles. But the technology needs to differ across the organization. On a departmental basis, often organizations will perform what is called a gap analysis to answer these questions. Gap analysis is a great tool to help you identify the gap between your current situation and the state that you want to reach, along with the tasks or tools that you need to complete or implement to close the gap. Gap analysis can be employed both at the now state and at the future state, such as your strategic business outcomes. Typically, there are 3 major steps in gap analysis. In the case of your current state, you want to identify the state of your product or service that you promise to be delivering today. Then, analyze your current situation. Are you delivering the product or service as promised? And then, finally, you want to identify how you're going to bridge the gap. From the technology standpoint, this involves determining if you are employing the appropriate tools and systems to support your needs. As part of this, it's important that you know your users. Users have different habits, needs, and requirements to be productive. What functions are required to perform essential day-to-day responsibilities for each business unit? How does your sales team work compared to your accounting team, compared to your executive team? Are you investing the proper tools, both internal and external? For instance, for your salespeople, do they have the proper system to document all of their interactions with the account contacts? Who else needs access to that information? Do they have the capability to document interactions while offline? Do they require hotspots? What about engineering? Are their computers powerful enough to render drawings and images quickly? Is quick rendering even a requirement? And for management, are there the proper tools in place to provide both a point-in-time and over-time snapshots and reports of the business from a financial or product service delivery standpoint? Knowing what tools you need enables you to get a baseline assessment to determine where you have a gap. As you're focusing on what you actually have, think about productivity and compatibility. Are you aligned with sector and IT industry best practices? Evaluate your architecture, hardware and software and networking. Where is technology working? Where is it not working? Which systems are used and how are they used? Which systems are not used and should be decommissioned? Are all of your users using the same versions of software? Are there any software compatibility issues? For example, some Microsoft Office products are not compatible with others. Some versions of Outlook are not compatible with newer versions of Microsoft Exchange Server. Further, at this point, no computer should be running Windows XP. What line of business applications are used? Where are you in your product lifecycle or refresh? This one's important. Where can improvements be made, and are you investing in the proper tools? At the end of your analysis, you're going to have a list of items and recommendations that need to be addressed. It's important to go through the recommendations with a checklist of items discovered during your gap analysis or baselining period. Some of the things you will be able to implement without difficulty. Other things will be more challenging to implement based on the cost or workflow. The important thing to do is to identify those things you can execute right away and get them scheduled within the next 90 days. Then, document those other items that are priority but for one reason or another need to wait. But try to identify when you will be in a position to execute them. Don't just let items sit on a list. You need to assign dates. Even if the dates are not met, you will reevaluate as that date is coming due. Now that your business goals are aligned with your current technology systems, it's time to look ahead and lay out a roadmap. Similar to the analysis you performed to define your current needs, you will now perform a similar exercise for your longer-term needs. It starts with knowing where you want to be in 18, 36, and 60 months. In most cases, you will be building on what you already have based on your confidence in the tools you are currently using. You'll also be keeping an eye on sector and industry trends and best practices along with anticipated future needs that are more strategic than logistical, such as business continuance or phone systems. What are your strategic business outcomes? They need to be defined. Then, define and plan the alignment of technology with the needs to meet them. So, some key things to consider. How will your users be working and communicating? Will that change over time? Which devices will they use? What technology can they leverage to be more productive? Do you have the right level of support and tools for users? For example, your remote workforce. Do they have the most appropriate tools and solutions to work outside the office? On the security and threat standpoint, what will your current security tools protect you down the road? How will you adapt to new threats? Further, trends are to go towards cloud-based solutions. It's important to know the pros and cons. It's also important to know that there's a difference between consumer versus corporate technology. Dropbox, Google Apps, for example, those are some things to consider. Technology and support. Will your technology be able to expand to support your growing user base? Where are you in your product lifecycle? What about storage? How will you account for future growth? Business continuity, for instance, requires a top-down approach. What are the pros and cons of technologies that are out there? Do you know the technology options you have available to you? Have you prepared a budget? Have you prepared a cost analysis chart? How do you intend to measure your return on investment? Once you factor those items, you'll be able to create an actionable plan that will serve as the basis for your roadmap. Creating a roadmap is more documenting a commitment to business priorities than anything else. Prioritize the execution of recommendations and needs you have. Set checkpoints where you can't proceed until they are addressed. Plan your budget. Then allocate the resources. If you don't have them, outsource them. Let's take a look at some examples. The following is an example of a typical cost forecast sheet I put together with clients as part of our VCIO relationship. Our goal is to capture everything that would be a line item for IT. What you are looking at here is a list of every IT expenditure in the leftmost column. The next column is the known warranty expiration date or target time frame when we choose to implement a project or upgrade. Each of the remaining columns are listings on a yearly basis for items that would fall into either the category of warranty or maintenance or new, such as an upgrade, or an implementation of new technology. One of the benefits of taking the time to create a cost forecast such as this is that you're in a position to see things both holistically and individually on a line item basis. This unique perspective almost guarantees the ability to help you to keep technology costs down, especially as you're prioritizing what you do and do not need. It also helps to spread costs out over time, thus ensuring you're able to meet your implementation goals. The next slide is a continuation. You'll notice we aggregate our overall costs so we can forecast them on a yearly and multi-year basis. This tool dramatically aids in the compilation of the actual roadmap. It allows you to determine what you can afford to spend and when you can afford to spend it. Obviously, we're not looking at specific dates at this point. Once you have your cost forecast in place and have determined how and when you're going to implement the expenditures, you can formalize your roadmap. The roadmap is going to focus on projects. It's not going to focus on ongoing expenditures such as web hosting or ISP costs or costs for any ongoing operations. Remember, the purpose of a roadmap is a plan to implement technology that aligns IT with strategic business outcomes. Your roadmap can be compiled in different forms. It can take on the form of a spreadsheet, as you see here, or it can take on the form of a timeline, or the format of a Gantt chart. I like this format because it allows me to see the project along with the description, the urgency, whether it's approved or unapproved, when it was discussed, how it aligns with the strategic business outcomes, and the targeted time frame and cost. It's very important that we have that column there for the strategic business outcomes because it allows me to see if we are in alignment. And at the end of each time period, it allows me to go back and say, yes, we are in alignment, or no, we're not in alignment. As you see, we have a defined roadmap for the next few years that is forward-looking, incorporates cost, and most importantly, ensures that IT is aligned with the strategic business outcomes of the business. There are a number of tools that aid in the compilation of a good roadmap. The cost forecast sheet, as you saw, was a very helpful tool, as are the tools that report and score compliance as required. You should also be looking at documentation frameworks for business continuance planning and security practices. A formal risk assessment would also be of benefit since inadequate attention to risk, either from a security standpoint or business interruption, will have a negative impact on operations and your ability to deliver your products and services smoothly. Worse yet, you may inadvertently be compromising corporate data. IT Solutions VCIOs deliver VCIO reports twice yearly. A key component of these reports is an assessment of risk from the security standpoint. Where are there security holes? What are your security policies, etc.? Additionally, the conversation incorporates dialogue about storage of data, protection of intellectual property, tolerable downtime. Some of the tools we use are proprietary. However, there are many tools available, such as through Microsoft or the major security software firms, such as McAfee or Sophos, to name a few, so that you can perform your own internal assessment. Another key for the roadmap is to stay abreast of industry best practices and changes. Attending trainings and lunch and learns is very beneficial to that end. These are all areas where it's very helpful to have a trusted advisor, such as either a VCIO or an internal CIO, who can keep you apprised of the industry trends and best practices. However, even with all the right tools, there remain challenges. So what are some of the challenges to creating a successful roadmap? Well, they could be any of the following: incomplete information, lack of defined goals, conflicts with compliance, lack of budget, buy-in. It's very important that everyone is on the same page and there are no alternative agendas, such as when someone has their own ideas of what works. Google Apps is an example of this. Along the same line, you can have resistance to change. This is about the strategic outcomes for the company and organization. So we've talked a lot today about the need to look strategically and the importance of a roadmap. At this point, I'd like to open the discussion up to any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, John. Lots of great information here. It looks like we had a bunch of questions come in during the session. Bear with me while I scroll through these. All right, the first question is, what exactly do you mean by top-down approach to business continuity?
Business continuity is one of those areas that is often not considered until it's too late. The goal of a business continuance plan from an IT and even from an overall corporate standpoint is to try to account and document for all those items that are critical to operating as a business in the event of an outage. You think about Katrina, that's a classic example. Also, it's an opportunity to define how long you're willing to accept an outage, whether it be an internet outage, a power outage, or the building itself being unavailable, or even a critical system. Because of the importance of a business continuance plan, it's often important for the initiative to be led by either the CEO or the president. Everyone in the organization needs to know this is a business priority and it should not be impacted by everyday disruptions. And often, only the CEO or the president or someone at that general level can provide the weight to ensure that one is completed within an allocated time frame. It's really critical that somebody is actually seeing this from start to finish and they know that at the end of the day that there's accountability, because if you end up getting into a situation where you need to follow some sort of business continuous plan and don't have one, then you're actually going to be flat-footed. An example of this is we are a service-based organization. IT Solutions relies on our help desk and most importantly on our phones and our systems. If the phones were to be out for an hour, it's going to be a problem. If the phones are going to be out for half of a day, it's a major problem. If the phones are going to be out for more than that, we should just plan on losing a lot of business. And so as part of that, as part of our business continuance plan, basically what we do, and again, this was driven from the top, is we put together plans for how we're going to contact each other, how do people know what to do, even things like how are checks going to be paid. But when it comes to the phones, we have backup phone systems such that if our primary phones are out, that individual cell phones have the calls routed to them, and even have the ability to get direct dial to individual extensions from our cell phones. So these are all the things that you have to think about. You also have to think about what your recovery time needs to be. So it's a long answer to your question, but suffice it to say, A, business continuance is critical to have a plan, and then B, it's also important that you actually complete that plan, because a half-done plan isn't going to help anybody in the event of a major outage.
And the follow-up question to that was, do you have any recommendations for business continuity tools?
We do. These are some of the things that we actually sit down and talk to people about when we're looking at an overall plan. Number one you have to keep in mind that really this is a documentation framework. That's really what a business continuance plan is. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a living document, but it really is a documentation framework. You can do it on your own, or there are different sites out there that actually provide for that documentation framework. I would say that in terms of getting some very good information, the federal government itself has some very good resources at ready.gov. That's a very good starting point for getting some of the questions asked. Additionally, often your insurance agent might have some guidelines there in terms of how to put things together. You should also be talking to your phone vendors. Very important that you ask them what your options are. Sometimes your carrier itself will provide the same options. We use a service in the event of something called virtual PBX is one of the services that are out there, so when our phone system goes down, that our individual cell phones are rung, and as I said, we have that capability to forward calls to individual extensions. In the event of snow days or emergency outages, we use a service called One Call Now. So what happens is that if indeed we were facing a critical storm and we knew that everybody would not be able to get in, basically what happens is the president of the company makes the call as to whether or not the office will be closed. He then records a message. That message then goes out to everybody's cell phone, and a follow-up call is also made to everybody's home line as well. This is really about documenting the different tools that are out there. For email, there are services out there that provide email continuity. All of our clients have a service called Mimecast, which is primarily for spam services and also encryption of mail, but it also has a critical service there, which is message continuity. What's really important here are not specifically the tools, but that you have your processes all documented as to how you perform in an outage. You need to also determine what you can afford to in downtime and what you can afford to spend financially. It's about risk analysis and risk management.
Okay. Another one is, I work for a nonprofit, and we currently use both Google Apps and Dropbox. I picked up on your comment advising against it. Can you expand upon this?
Google Apps and Dropbox are great products. What has to happen is that you need to make a determination about the storage of your information. Specifically with regard to Dropbox, there really are no controls on Dropbox whatsoever. Dropbox itself is a consumer-based product. Dropbox also has a product called Dropbox for Teams, which is different from the consumer-based model in that basically I set up each one of my directories and I assign what people can do with documents that are in one of those directories. When you are using Dropbox at the consumer level, basically you have no control whatsoever about what your employees do with any kind of data. There's a term out there called data leakage. And so I could have an employee that could be plotting their termination or leaving their exit from the company, and they could actually be just saving documents to their Dropbox. I would never know. Furthermore, those individuals could also be, could be sending links to documents on corporate data for stuff that they have in their own Dropbox. So it's not necessarily that things are inherently bad, you just don't have the control. With regard to Google Apps, great product. It is not as polished as Office 365 or Exchange services. One of the things that you need to be mindful of is what are the compliance features of Google Apps or even Office 365, or for that matter, any other mail service system that you're using. Google will tell you that when it comes to information for the healthcare industry, that they are HIPAA compliant. As you read through the Business Associates Agreement and you look a little bit further, there is not necessarily the same protection that it appears that there is. So really, these are just more flags for you to be able to make decisions for yourself as to what the risk is and whether or not you want to bear that risk.
Your budget sheet had a section for miscellaneous. Can you give an example of any items that would fall into this category?
I can. So we made it a very strong point to go and create that cost forecast. If your organization operates and is bound by budgets and operates exclusively by that budget, then you must allow for some unplanned items that may or may not be accounted for a need that may arise or some unknown technology. Remember, the purpose is that we're looking outwards 18, 36, and even 5 years from now. We make it a strong point to say you need to keep abreast of changing trends in the industry and also best practices. Truth be known, we don't know what's going to be out there on the market in 3 years, let alone 5 years. But if you're putting together a cost forecast sheet, you need to be able to account for those things that you can identify. Furthermore, you also should be able to account for unanticipated growth. So if you are costing each user that you bring on, you know that you need to buy them typically a computer, whether it be a desktop or a laptop. You know that they're going to very likely need a cell phone, or they're going to need to be reimbursed for that phone. You may have it that they're going to need licenses for different things. These are the things that you need to account for. You try to account for those in that cost forecast sheet. But again, to your question, if you want to operate as a budget-based organization, you're going to have to put in some sort of percentage for that which you don't know.
Okay, and will the budget sheet be available for download?
Yes. So if you are interested, then feel free to reach out to Andrea, and she'll be happy to provide that to you. Additionally, a recording of this webcast is going to be available on the Business Tech Talk website for you to download so you can reference this again.
Okay, and the final question is, how do you recommend getting buy-in for a tool that we believe we need?
So that's actually a very good question. Look, sometimes if you're the business owner, it's very simple. You identify the need, you determine if you have the budget for it, you then delegate the implementation, and you're done. Again, the purpose of the roadmap, the purpose of the cost forecast sheet, and all these other tools is try to have what we refer to around here as the better behaved business, and trying to abide by all these things that you put in place. Sometimes you're not in the position to make the decision for yourself. So you need to make the business case for your recommendation. And while it goes a little beyond the scope of this discussion, there are tools out there, one of which that comes to mind is something called an STP, or a situation target proposal, that you can Google, or we can get you more information on. It is simply a quick way of describing a current condition, what the new condition would be, and then how to make the change. In reality, it's just a streamlined approach for making the case for something. Again, you're going to be visiting and revisiting this cost forecast sheet as things change. The idea here is, number one, you want to be able to have something in place, you want something that's updatable, but you also want to be able to at least stick to a general path as you move forward so that you can have value to what it is you're doing today and what is repeatable over the coming years.
All right. That's all the questions that we had today. We hope you all enjoyed the session, and thank you all for joining us.
Great. And so we did tell you we're going to try to keep this short, so we hope that it was short and focused for you.
Thanks again.